everybody. Welcome to the Week 9 overview. This week, we are all about revision. This is where we wrap up the Rhetorical Analysis unit. I know it's gone quickly. So as I said, this week, we're all about revision. The objectives are dealing with revision, implementing the feedback that you get, making sure you proofread and edit your document prior to submission, develop strategies for reviewing, collaborating, revising, and editing. Remember, those are two different things. And experience the social aspects of the writing process. As well, you will be utilizing the MLA conventions for formatting academic essays, and also you will be reflecting upon the writing process for the second essay assignment. So the readings this week all center on revision. I have three choices from the University of Mississippi Rhet Lab. The first is revising for structure. I'm going to open that up, just explain a little bit about it. This page is on global structure. So really thinking about how the various parts of your essay fit together and flow together and how you can go about revising. One suggestion is to write stronger introductions. Another is to look for a stronger thesis, maybe even in the conclusion of your essay draft, the restatement of your thesis. Also, you want to start thinking more about audience receptiveness, writing in a certain way so that your audience is better able to receive the message that you are putting out there. And then there are a couple of suggestions, and this we'll talk more about in the revision Canvas page, the revision strategies Canvas page. One suggestion is to quote unquote cut up your essay. Now, I know that most of us are composing digitally. We don't print out copies of our drafts, but sometimes that can really be helpful to print out a copy of your draft, cut the paragraphs up, and then maybe see if there's a better way to rearrange those paragraphs. So that's one suggestion. Another suggestion is to create a reverse outline based on what you've already written. So you can take your draft and then try to construct an outline based on the various paragraphs that you've written and see if that makes the most sense for your ideas to be flowing in a logical, organic manner. There's also a practice that you can do at the bottom of the page, thinking how you can arrange the sentences to reflect the correct reverse outline of the paragraphs above. So you have a choice of sentences here to show how you could best reflect and make a reverse outline. So that's the first one. Then the next one, I think it's the next page. Nope. We had that last week. Revising for style, word choice. Now is really when you need to start thinking about word choice and how to write in a more quote unquote academic tone. So that means trying to avoid slang, find alternatives to the very common slang things that we use in our day-to-day language. You also want to avoid language that is overly casual. Now, what this means is not necessarily writing in a stiff manner or trying to mimic an overly formal language that might not be natural to you. I want you to use your own unique voice, but avoid becoming too casual. So it's a fine balance between writing with your true authentic voice, but also writing for a more formal audience. You want to avoid things like cliches, overused expressions, that kind of thing that might not be appealing to your audience. And also be careful when you use words that sound alike but might have different meanings. So you want to be clear on things like affect and effect, there, idea, ideal, lay, and lie. If you're in doubt, you can always look things up on the internet. The internet is fantastic for this, and you'll find a good grammar website that will offer you some help. You also want to use specific words rather than terms or words that are overly general. You don't want to have synonyms, or you don't want to have vague words like thing, people, nice, good, bad, and interesting. Those are all kind of blah and vague language, right? So you want to be more specific, use more specific details to make sure that you're really saying the thing that you want to say. Again, there is a practice section down below if you want to put things into practice. The third selection is revising for style, choosing words that are sensitive to your audience. Now, this might seem a little bit quote unquote woke for some of you, but we are in academia trying to write so that our audience isn't offended. Not that we have to treat our audience like snowflakes, but there are certain terms, especially relating to gender, race, and ethnicity, that you want to be careful so that you're not offending a certain group of people. So now it is completely acceptable to use the gender neutral pronoun there, the singular there, THEIR. That is accepted by all of the major writing governing bodies. So MLA, APA, Chicago, all of those people who govern how we write and the style that we use. The singular they is now completely acceptable. And I find that singular they there is a lot less clunky or awkward to use than things like he or she together, lumped together, or his, hers, that kind of thing. Just using the singular they or their is much more acceptable, and it's much cleaner from a linguistic stance, right? So that's an easy way to make language more inclusive. Some other examples might be things like police officer rather than policeman, mail carrier rather than mailman, humankind rather than mankind, people rather than men and women, right? Just people instead. Choosing to be a little bit more inclusive, less gender specific, because we know that, especially with with careers and such, right? Those aren't gender specific anymore. They may have been once upon a time, but we're living in the 21st century and it's really no longer gender specific, right? So we have, instead of waiter or waitress, we have server, right? It's a very easy thing to adapt to. Likewise, with racial or ethnic terms, you want to be careful using terms like Indian, because there are people who live in the country of India who can be called Indian or East Indian, right? Whereas we have people who are native people in the United States, we call them Native American or American Indian instead. So things like Latino or Latina or Latinx rather than Mexican, African American rather than colored or Negro, or acceptable now is Black with the capital B, not having to be African American because not all Black people are American, right? That kind of a thing. And Inuit rather than, or Native Alaskan rather than Eskimo. There are also terms for people with disabilities, right? So it's good to be sensitive to those things. For example, the term blind has negative connotation. So you want to think of, people who have partial vision or people who are visually impaired. Same thing with people who have a loss of hearing. Hearing impaired is better than deaf. Mentally disabled is, or mentally ill rather than retarded or crazy. I don't like to say the R word. It makes me very uncomfortable because I grew up in a generation where that was like such a negative, pejorative term to use when, it's not it's not a nice thing to say, right? A person or people with disabilities, or a person with a disability rather than crippled or handicapped, right? So those are all things to now start to think about being sensitive to, because we want to be inclusive and make sure that those who are reading our words aren't offended, right? You want to be sensitive to that, and it's has nothing to do with quote unquote wokeness. It just happens to be the right thing to do, right? The sensitive thing to do to make sure that all people feel like they're not being excluded or othered. So this is a really good page to take a look at. We also have the Canvas page that is called Revision Strategies, and this is really the focus of this week's work. There's an embedded lecture. It's a little bit older, within 2 years, I think, but still very relevant. So I go over editing, proofreading, and revision strategies, and I talk about all of these revision strategies that are used as examples below. So I'm not going to go over them in this video. There's a whole separate video for you to watch regarding revision, editing, and revision strategies. So make sure that you read the page and you watch the video. It'll make a whole lot more sense. Jumping down to the videos for this week, I have, again, this is the same video that's embedded in that page that we just looked at on Canvas. I put it here in case you want to go back and watch it again. Also, we have 2 crash course videos this week. One is how to revise, and the other is what is editing. Those are all in the neighborhood of about 10 minutes long. So the 2 assignments that are due at the end of the week this week on Sunday are essay number 2, the Rhetorical Analysis Final Draft. That is just revising, taking into consideration the feedback that you get on your rough draft, and cleaning things up so that you have a more solid final draft to submit for your rhetorical analysis. I'm not going to open the assignment page. It's the same as last week from the rough draft. Actually, I will, because we do have the analysis essay rubric that I think is important for you to take a look at, to know the various things that I will be assessing you on in this final submission. So I will be looking at your introduction, your thesis, and your conclusion paragraphs. I will also be looking for some evidence of your understanding of the rhetorical situation as it applies to your chosen commercial or advertisement, as well as the rhetorical appeals. Have you at least considered ethos, pathos, or logos? If you're comfortable working with Kairos, you can do that as well. I will be looking at organization, making sure that the ideas that you present in your essay flow logically and smoothly. I'm also going to be looking for that audience awareness. So things like how you engage the audience, the type of language that you use, to make sure that you aren't excluding any type of audience or any potential audience. And lastly, I'll be looking at language use and mechanics. So when I provide you feedback for on your rough draft, I also do a bit of proofreading for you because I'm nice like that. Some teachers do not do that, but I do. I feel that is a way for you to learn grammar and punctuation hands-on, within context, so it's not divorced from what you're actually writing. So that's a way for you to help reinforce all of those grammar rules, word usage, sentence structure, punctuation, that kind of thing. And then, yeah, so, it's mechanics. I'm not going to take tons of points off if you still are struggling with spelling or mechanics, but at least you've made an effort to correct those errors that I've pointed out in your rough draft. Then you're going to be good, right? You're not going to lose a whole lot of points. But if you don't make any attempt to fix the errors that I have pointed out, yes, you're going to lose points, right? Because that's careless editing, or you haven't done any editing as well, right? Maybe you have just taken your rough draft and you resubmitted it as your final draft, making absolutely no changes. Yes, I'm going to mark you off for not putting in the work to implement the feedback that I took a lot of time to provide for you. So yeah, that's when you will lose points, right? So it's good to pay attention to the feedback, and if you aren't sure how to find the feedback on your document, please shoot me an email and I will point you toward the resources that you need so that you know how to get the feedback and know how to make changes and revise and edit correctly. Okay, so that is the assignment page. And then, of course, we also have the writer's memo, journal number 5, which is kind of a repeat of what you did there. Now I'm asking you to reflect on the rhetorical analysis essay. Again, think about the purpose of your essay, who your audience is, and why, what you did well, what you could improve, that kind of thing. You can read the whole page yourself. So try to write a minimum of 1 page, and it's best if you can upload a file, but if you really want to just do it as a text entry, that's fine as well. Okay, so those are the 2 things. And of course, don't submit the writer's memo if you don't submit the draft, right? Because what I'm asking you to reflect upon is the writing process of that particular essay. It's not something that you can just rattle off randomly. It really has to be in context of writing the rhetorical analysis. Okay, so we're clear on that. If you have any questions in the meantime, one thing I forgot to point out, the rhetorical analysis revision and editing checklist. This is also a helpful tool. It's a PDF that I just revised from an older version of it, if it ever loads here. This is more in applies more to the rhetorical analysis, revision, and editing process. So, these are all reminders that you should go through each time you are editing and revising an essay, right? Making sure that you do the assignment correctly. And then looking at things like your title, your introduction, your thesis statement, how it's organized, the various paragraphs that you have, your conclusion, and then look at things like sentence structure. Does the writing avoid sentence fragments, comma splices, run-ons? If it just seems off to you and you're not quite sure how it should be fixed, you can always shoot me a message and ask me what you did wrong and how you can improve it. I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Likewise with punctuation, spelling, and mechanics, if you're not sure why something is punctuated a certain way, you can ask me a question. Make sure that you spell things correctly, use capitals and italics, abbreviations, number, hyphens, blah, blah, blah. Make sure all those things are used correctly. Remember, we're not texting each other, so we have to use the conventional rules of academic English, right? And then, of course, proofreading. Make sure that you double check for any of those errors. Make sure that you have addressed the things that I pointed out to you in your rough draft, right? That shows me that you care. That shows me that you've taken the feedback into consideration. And that will help you out in the long run. So this is a good checklist to make sure that you've got everything addressed that needed to be addressed for this assignment. Again, if you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with me, and I'm happy to provide you. There's a stink bug on my desk. I'm happy to provide you with any information you might need to improve your writing. Okay. Have a fantastic week, everybody, and I look forward to reading your final drafts. Take care. Bye-bye.